This is otherwise state champ Alex Thompson. This is Josh Elwer from the University of Northern Iowa, and you're listening to Potentially Dangerous on IA Wrestle.
Hey! Is this heaven?
No. It's Iowa.
From high school to international wrestling, on the mat and beyond, this is the Potentially Dangerous podcast with the guys from IA Wrestle.
If you're a fighter, you like a fight. If you're an American, you like a fight. If you're an Iowa Hawkeye, you know you're going to get a fight.
Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and all your podcast-friendly apps. And follow us on social media platforms at IA Wrestle. Time to strap it up and get to the show. Alright, this is Potentially Dangerous episode 101. Special episode tonight. We are going to have a long episode, I feel like, guys. I've got Ross Bartachek joining me, as always, and then Lars. Lars is coming out of the woodwork here. The summer is gone. Now it's time to go to the moon, as he must say, and the Fab 50 rankings are going to be updated. You've seen them on the website. He's got them updated for us. We've needed one, and he's finally got it. He's got his feet wet, as they would say, because the high school rankings, those are going to be right around the corner here next month. So, Lars, Ross, welcome to the show.
Lars, it's been a blue moon since you've been on.
Yeah, I don't even know the last time I was on the podcast. I've been staying busy away from here, so good to be back and talking a little wrestling on here again.
High school wrestling, the doors open like in 2 weeks.
13th.
The 13th. Wow, that's crazy. Excited. I mean, United Conflict obviously kicked it off for us. Preseason Nationals, Super 32. We've got a long show for you. So first off, we're gonna talk a little bit about some shenanigans going on in Fort Dodge. Then we're gonna get to a little bit of Iowa State Media Day that I was at, and then we'll talk a little bit about Preseason Nationals, Super 32, how that really affected Lars' Fab 50 rankings, and then obviously we'll break down those Fab 50 rankings for you. So first off, Fort Dodge, guys. Are you familiar?
What's going on?
Are you familiar with what happened in Fort Dodge last year? Kind of not this time, just around the new year. They were looking to pass a bond to start a new wrestling room in Fort Dodge. You guys remember that?
Yeah, I remember you talking about that earlier this year. I think we even had an article on it.
So the coaches at Fort Dodge, told me, hey, post this on IA Wrestle. Got to get this out to not just Fort Dodge people, just the surrounding areas, to maybe poke somebody in Fort Dodge to try to pass this vote. There was an elementary that was condemned a few years back, and they were trying to pass this bond to renovate it. And, long story short, basically in the plans for this bond to pass was a brand new wrestling room. Fort Dodge has been in a room that was built to dry football pads, from what I've been told. As many people around the state of Iowa know, that we basically will put a mat anywhere. Cafeteria, some schools roll up the mats every single day. They don't have a wrestling room. So Fort Dodge is in a room that was not properly ventilated. Heating system was crap. So it was much needed. And the school board made videos. The superintendent came in, had a voiceover of this cool video about, basically like a video of kids over in Ethiopia starving, like sad story that you need to pass this vote. And it passed. But what we're finding out details are, as at the 11th hour, guys, is that the fine print said, I haven't seen the fine print, but I'm being told that it was going to be moved to a multi-purpose room. Now, I don't know where you guys grew up, but we had our own wrestling room. I mean, Ross and Lars, did you guys have your own wrestling room, or were you guys cafeteria boys?
We had a multi-purpose room, too.
Yeah, we had our own wrestling room at the high school. We had our own wrestling room at the junior high. I mean, the only thing that we shared with was the kids club.
So, I mean, it's not out of left field that wrestling rooms, multi-purpose rooms, are used by multiple sports. PEs use, the wrestling room, but wrestling rooms have to be maintained and clean, because if you bring in a football team or basketball, anybody, they just bring in their tennis shoes and it creates diseases. So I think that's a big reason why Fort Dodge people are upset, that this is a multi-purpose room. It's really kind of turned into a cheer room. They actually raised enough money to raise the ceiling so cheerleading can be in there. Again, that's not an issue. The issue, it'd be fine to have cheerleaders in there. The issue, I think, from what I'm gathering from Fort Dodge people, is they used wrestling as the driving force for people in the community. Because Fort Dodge is one of the most well-connected wrestling traditional powerhouses in the state that we have, right? So anybody that's connected to wrestling is going to, oh yeah, you going to give us a new room? Absolutely. Pass the bond, raise our taxes.
So I guess my question for you is, I'm a little bit ignorant on this. So, you're saying cheerleading's in there, and obviously that's not that, that's not a backbreaker. So, is season's getting ready to start in a couple weeks. So, so what's the issue since, practice hasn't really started? I get you could be misleading the voters, but what's the issue actually with the room?
I think the room is that wrestling is coaches, if someone calls at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, you want to open up the room to get some extra weight off or just get a workout in, you go into your wrestling room. In some schools, the coach has a key card, you go in, you're done. Well, from what I'm getting is that's not the case at Fort Dodge with this multi-purpose room. Something they thought it was going to be a wrestling-only room. So a guy like Brody Teskey's training for Super 32. Wrestling does not start for a couple weeks. He wants to get in there and work out with a kid, and a freshman or sophomore, whoever it is, to get some extra weight off or get a workout in. He's got to schedule a time with cheerleading or any other sport to use that room. That's, I think, what the problem is because I think the wrestlers in the community thought that it was wrestling only. I think that's the biggest issue. And also, the room is not a wrestling. Wrestling rooms have, when you go in and do some, Southeast Poker Room, Johnson Room, brand new room, it's got Johnson Wrestling on it. It's got past Fargo All-Americans, past state champions, place winners. It looks like a wrestling room. This wrestling room looks like literally a cafeteria. It doesn't have any branding of Fort Dodge Wrestling in it or anything. It's just kind of a prison type room. So I think the kids just take ownership when they see somebody that, that's a goal, right? You have a goal. There's somebody on the wall that you want to be, and that's not there in the Fort Dodge Wrestling Room because they switched this on the end. So I think wrestlers in the community that are around wrestling just feels like they kind of got tricked into thinking that they were going to have a wrestling-only facility.
Yeah, I live in West Liberty now, and they have what they call a multi-purpose room. I know it's seen as a storm shelter, basically. I believe cheerleaders use it some, PE uses it some, but there's no question that it's a wrestling-first room. Like say, when you walk in, it's got all your state champions, place winners, all that stuff on the wall. It's got wrestling pictures on the wall. There's really no mistaking it. And the understanding is that it's wrestling first. Other people have to get it approved to be in there if it's not wrestling. So to think that, they used it and said, Fort Dodge, this is going to be a wrestling room. Maybe some other people use it, but now the wrestlers have to schedule time, was definitely misleading. If that's the case, that's, even if other people are going to use it, it should have to run through the wrestling program if that's the way it was promoted.
This sounds like, bait and switch. And I think Lars said it perfectly that if you advertise it and you built it with wrestling dollars, and then it's the wrestling team that has to schedule it. If I was in Fort Dodge, and like Tony said, that it's just that well-connected community, it's got that tradition. Everybody lives and breathes that wrestling in that community. I mean, I'd be livid. I'd be pretty hot.
Yeah, it's what wrestling always gets. It always gets done to them. It seems like it gets pushed to the side. And again, it's not that they don't want the cheerleaders in there. It just feels like, or any sport, like they just feel like it's not their room. So there's just no ownership to it, and it's frustrating. Like one person said, this is their analogy is, mind you, they were in a room that was not good, like heating, ventilation was horrible, and they said, we went from the palace, renting a mansion, to now renting a hotel room. Like the room is a lot nicer, but they feel like they have to rent their time there. And that's just not a good feeling when you have, I mean, what, they got 4 potential state champs in that room right now. They've got multiple national ranked wrestlers, multiple Division I commitments, and they're just supposed to train from November to February. And that's just not how wrestling works. I mean, think about like Don Bosco or Lisbon, real small community, right? What if they did, they put plans in place to, those are 2 huge wrestling communities. They put plans into place that got all these architect plans. It says wrestling room. Wrestling room is going to double in size, 2 mats, whatever. And then the bill's about ready to get passed, and everyone finds out that, well, we're going to have another sport in here too. And it's not going to be just wrestling. It would just be furious. I would be furious. So, I think what we're going to try to do here on, IA Wrestle is, we've got some perspectives. We're hoping to get the AD superintendent on in the coming weeks. Maybe not on the podcast, but maybe a exclusive interview with them to figure out kind of how, get their point of view of how maybe, right now we all have the wrestling side of view. So maybe if we can get the AD, the school board members, and maybe kind of find out if this is something that they felt like everyone knew, that would be different. But I've seen the postcard, and it clearly says wrestling room. You can go to IA Wrestle and just put right now, go to iwrestle.com and search like Bond passing Fort Dodge or Fort Dodge wrestling room, and you're going to see the article. There's going to be a YouTube video that the superintendent did, I believe, his voiceover. And you can tell me that they're not trying to pass this as a wrestling room. So we'll get more information on this as time comes. But I would suggest anybody that's close to Fort Dodge, or just ask some questions. How did this happen? Or what's the truth? And maybe we can dig some more into it of what actually happened. But I've asked non-Fort Dodge people, non-Fort Dodge wrestling fans, and they said, yeah, we thought that they were getting a new wrestling room. There was never a multi-purpose room. So other people outside of wrestling, too, are frustrated. So let's, you guys got anything else on that, or any questions from what I've, gathered, I guess?
But I do want to plug that, if you want to go to IA Wrestle, we got that search bar on the side. And that article you're talking about, Tony's called Bond Vote for Long Overdue Fort Dodge Wrestling Room. So if anybody listening wants to go back and kind of check out what Tony put up like a year ago, just that's the name of the article. Search that. You should be able to find it.
Okay. So more on that later. But let's get to Iowa State. I know, Lars, you haven't been able to watch any interviews, but Ross, I know you've kind of been combing through a few of the interviews, I guess. So what did you kind of take away before I ramble on of what I gathered from Iowa State? What did you take away from some of the interviews?
I'm still working through them, but I did get the ones we put up tonight, the first day, the day of media day, and the ones that are going to go up tomorrow morning, so November 1st morning. I loved when Marcus Harrington, somebody asked him about how he's putting on weight, and they asked him if he's eating what Kyvan's been eating. And he's like, I don't know if I want to be eating what Kyvan's eating. So I thought that was pretty hilarious. So that was I'm pretty excited to see what this team's going to be like this year. I think one of the guys I really want to hear from, Mike Zadek, Brent Metcalf, those are 2 guys that are usually pretty fun to hear from. They got that energy about them that they usually want to make you run through a brick wall. So hopefully we got something on them. But so far, the wrestler interviews, I think everybody's really hungry. And, Marcus Simmons, that interview went up today, Halloween Day. So just what he said is very true, that last year's team did have a lot of talent. It just wasn't, he said they were at the wrong weights. But I think a lot of it was just there was so much going on with the coaching situation where everyone thought pretty much from week one that maybe KJ was going to lose his job. It just was a very difficult situation for that team. So I'm really excited to see, everyone's expecting a little bit of the down team, but there's a lot of potential there. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, Iowa State, there was a ton of media people there. Like last year there was about the same, but this year there's definitely more news networks there, which I mean didn't surprise me. There's so much buzz around Iowa State. Record season ticket holders have come out. I can't. It just mind boggles me that Dresser and company have been able to sell more season tickets after losing to everyone basically, and there's all this hype for this season, and they haven't even won a single duel. Than like the times where Kale was there back, when Nichols and some of the greats of Iowa State's time. Like I used to sit in lines for hours to get into Iowa State duels. It's crazy to think that they've sold more season tickets than they did back when I was, grade school and junior high. So kudos to them. Biggest takeaways, Zadok is amazing. He's going to give us so many sound bites to the media and to fans. He is brutally honest. He came out, you get him in his element in that wrestling room, and he basically said, like, there's got to be some hard love here and some brutal truth. And if you're not willing to put in the time, then you're not going to fit in well with this system. And there was a lot of talk about how they used to run practices, how they're running practices now. And every single person really kind of just said, like, it was like an eye-opener, like, we just weren't training hard enough. That's really kind of what I took away from it.
Oh, no, that was another awesome takeaway from Marcus Simmons' interview. And I don't know who told them that they were going to do like an easy practice, and they got done with it. And they were like, well, wait a minute. This is like one of the hardest practices we went through like last year. And he said nowadays it's a lot easier. But when they first, Zadok's like, yeah, it's going to be an easy workout day. And then they're working as hard as they did on their hardest days last year. That's a complete culture change.
So everything really has flipped at Iowa State. It really has, and I think there's a ton of buzz, and we got all kinds of interviews up there, so you can kind of take what it is, it is what it is, I guess. They haven't accomplished anything, and they're coming out to prove some stuff at the Nichols Open. Probably the biggest news is that Austin Gomez has a concussion, and he will be out until the Lindenwood Open is what they're hoping. So he just wasn't himself at all during his interview. Usually full of confidence, but you never know when you got a concussion. They're really going to keep that in check. Obviously, he's a prize recruit, and they don't want to damage anything. So Austin Gomez definitely, it will be redshirting from what I've been hearing. Not gonna get him into the fire. Marcus Coleman redshirting, but he'll be wrestling this weekend. Pretty much everybody's going to be wrestling this weekend. There are some dings, but some of your big names will be wrestling. Gannon Gremmel, I talked to him, and that's a guy that everybody loves to hate. He's kind of a heel a little bit, and he really, I don't know if he just kind of falls into it or he wants to be the heel, but he's looking to try to take out Harrington, and he feels like he's been slighted by people, and we'll find out at the Open if he's really changed. He said that Dresser, Metcalf, Zadok has really kind of changed his mindset, that he's not the top dog, and he's got a lot of work to do. So I'll be interested to see what Gremel does at the Open this weekend. You could probably have a whole podcast on really this Iowa State team after this media day, but I'll let you kind of look at look at those videos and jump to your conclusion of how kind of their minds have changed a little bit. So let's jump into a huge weekend for youth wrestling, middle school and high school wrestling. I guess, Lars, you're obviously Fab 50. This was a huge weekend for you. We were going to release the Fab 50 prior, but this is a weekend, one of the biggest preseason weekends of the year for wrestling. What are your takeaways from preseason nationals and Super 32? Who impressed you? Who maybe kind of fell off the radar a little bit?
Yeah, I would say obviously the one that sticks out more than anything would be Colin Schreiber going out winning Super 32. The first guy from Iowa to ever win the high school division at Super 32. I know we haven't been sending guys out there for a lot of years, but still a really impressive feat. I think Max Thompson made the finals one year, and Dayton Racer, maybe if you consider him an Iowan. But other than that, we really haven't had anybody place that high, and that was great to see. He didn't have the Fargo he wanted. I think he got 6th in freestyle. He lost at the night of conflict. I think some people were kind of wondering if he was still, the top dog, and he goes out to Super 32 and beats everybody in his path. So that was a huge one. Another thing that stood out to me this weekend was Drew Bennett. We've talked about this guy a lot. He's a great wrestler. He's a nationally, I don't know, right now probably not nationally ranked, but he's been a nationally ranked wrestler. He's close. He's always close. He's always on the cusp of beating the best guys. He's always on the cusp of winning the big tournaments, but he just never has gotten over that hump. So to see him go up to Cedar Falls, win preseason nationals, I think that's a huge thing for Drew Bennett. Hopefully that just kind of steamrolls going forward, and, he just carries that momentum and keeps winning some tournaments. His teammate, Cade Lara, Kyle Biscaglia, these three are all going to be wrestling at UNI come next year. So for them to all go up there and win the tournament was awesome. And then another name that has just jumped off the page this summer, and really gotten on everybody's radar would be Hunter DeJong, Sibley Cheaton. This kid's didn't place as a freshman and sophomore at state, gets 4th last year. He's good, solid wrestler. But how good is he really? He goes and makes a junior world team this summer. He wins Pan Am gold, does all this stuff. Now it's time to get back into folk style, which he hasn't had as much success in. All he does is goes and wins preseason national title as well. So another huge weekend for DeJong as well. And then Nick Oldham. Nick Oldham's been just absolutely on fire as of late. I know he didn't place at Super 32, but he's in one of the toughest brackets out there. He goes 5-2. That's a great weekend for a kid like that, coming off of being a conflicted Carver outstanding wrestler. Beat the number 3 kid in the country at conflict. So Nick Oldham is making a big jump as well. So I'd say all those guys really made big gains this weekend.
And you just talked to Hunter DeJong this last week, right? Because last podcast we talked about where some of the top guys in Iowa were looking. So you got a chance to talk to him too, right? Yeah,
I did. I caught up with him a little bit last week, just on his plans and if there was any thought of committing before the season. And he thought about it. I know he had a couple schools in mind, Iowa State being one of them that was really high on his list. But he just decided, he thought that he could do a lot better this year. He thought he could prove himself a little more and, try to get a better scholarship offer from somebody. So really at this point, he's wide open. He's not planning on making any commitments till after the season. So, coming off a preseason national title, I would say that's gotta, up his stock, get a few more eyes open at the college level. If he can follow that up with a state title, hopefully he can get a really nice offer.
Yeah, I think there's, some of these, I don't want to call them lesser tier, but these guys that aren't the names that have been performing on the national stage their entire high school career, they all have this feeling where they want to wait till after the season, but I still kind of want to I feel like there's been quite a few guys that have changed their minds. I wonder if, he starts out doing pretty well, if that's something that changes, because from your article, about who's looking at him, he's already got Division I programs looking at him. So if he keeps continuing, to looking good, and I don't see why he has to wait to up his stock. I think, plenty of teams are pretty much figuring out what they're going to get. But the other guy that you mentioned that made a huge jump, winning the conflict, was he a match away from placing at Super 32? Nick Oldham. He's a guy. I mean, what kind of, how much is his stock up? I guess is what I should ask.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's way up. He's a guy who's placed twice at state. We saw him make the state finals as a freshman, which was huge. Last year, he had a little bit more of an up and down year. He had 6 losses, which is not terrible, but coming off of being a state finalist as a freshman was a little bit of a surprise. And then he gets beat at the state tournament, ends up getting 5th place last year. So, it was kind of one of those questions of, where exactly to slot him at. But like I say, he, with TJ Seabolt moving his club or having the extra practices down in Ames, I know Oldham's jumped on board there, really been working out with TJ a lot, and his summer's just been a monster. Like you say, you beat the number 3 kid in the country at conflict, your OW, make the blood round at Super 32 with some nice wins. That just proves that he's taken another step forward. I think he's ready to make another big jump. And, I really, really moved him up quite a ways in the Fab 50. He wasn't in it just, earlier this summer, but he's well into it at this point.
I mean, so a lot of our talk, this Fab 50, I mean, I really love it. Just kind of really gives a picture of our entire state. Pretty much the only people that aren't factored in are our freshmen. So, I mean, do we just want to jump into this? Tony, does that sound good to you?
Let's get it done. I mean, this is we got 50 kids. I can't imagine you're going to go through all of them. But
no, but so one question I want to ask is, Lars, you say Colin Shriver's our first Super 32 champion in the high school division. He's number 3 in the last set. Are we going to see some movement here at the top?
That was something I really kicked around. That's a tough decision. I know I talked to some other people about that, if he should be moved up or not. I really debated putting him at number 2. I think Alex Thompson, coming off of Fargo championship, is a pretty firm number 1 at this point. He's 3 years undefeated in Iowa, accolades on, and him winning Fargo, I think, solidifies him as that number 1 guy. We didn't see Teskey at Fargo. He did have a good Super 32. He got 4th. I don't know. I know some people have talked that, maybe that wasn't a great showing or we're a little disappointed. He did lose to a kid from Ohio, that really good kid, but probably not somebody he should lose to. His other loss was a tight match to Pat McKee, who's number 1 in the country. So, I don't really think it was a bad tournament for Brody. He just didn't win it, but he was right there. He's good enough to win it. So really I'm going to leave Teskey at 2 at this point. I know Shriver had that Super 32 championship, but, he, like I say, he didn't have a great Fargo, and, he's a little younger. He doesn't have the high school experience or the folk style accolades at this point that Teskey does. So, I really kicked around which way to go, but I did leave Teskey 2 and Cullen at 3.
So there's a lot of newcomers too, actually, some transfers in that we probably should talk about. I mean, there's a lot of people, when you come into Iowa, maybe the other states, Iowa people don't hold their state championships in high regards as ours, right? So you got a couple guys, Ramirez and Dugan. Are they in the top 20? Are they top 10, top 5? Where do you think you're going to slot these guys in at?
I actually slotted both of them, made the cut in the top 10. Dugan was a no-brainer for me to get him in the top 10. Kind of placing him in there is a little different. He's a 3-time Pennsylvania State place winner. Some people might look at it and go, he never won a state title out there, but, that's Pennsylvania State tournament's a monster too. I don't take anything really away from him for that. He's a two-time, last 2 years in a row, he's gotten third at Fargo. So his national accolades are really, really good. He's done a lot of other good things. So at this point, I slotted Duggan in at 7, right behind his now teammate Nelson Brands. So he slides in there. And then Ramirez, he's a 3-time Louisiana state champ, which, you're going to go the opposite way and go Louisiana. Nobody hears about wrestling in Louisiana, but still, he's a 3-time state champ. And then, he did go place 3rd at preseason nationals. He was a Fargo All-American this year. And another thing that stood out to me was he's got a win last year over Marcus Coleman. And I believe Coleman was number 4 on the Fab 50 last season, ahead of a lot of these guys too. So, that factored into me. That's an Iowa opponent that we were really familiar with, or that I was really familiar with. So I do have some confidence in Ramirez, and I slotted him in at number 10.
All right, I got a question because there's a couple guys that they were already Fab 50 guys, but they made a jump, and they were a couple juniors, Julian Broderson and Lance Runyon. And I think we know why they made a jump, but I got to ask you, is Julian Broderson ahead of Lance Runyon because of your 2A favoritism?
There you go. No, part of that coming in as well is, Broderson coming off of a state title. I do try to factor in folk style as well. It's really hard to go freestyle, folk style, Greco, kind of mix it all, intertwine it all. They were both Fargo All-Americans. Both really have a high ceiling. They've both been climbing. Like you say, they both made really big jumps. I think the thing that put Broderson, he's 1 spot ahead of Runyon. They're real close. I think the thing that probably factored in the most was that he does have that state title. So he's at 16 and Runyon at 17.
I would say Broderson, every time I talk about him or think about him, I feel like he's got just a huge ceiling for college wrestling. Like, I just feel like I saw he was on Northern Iowa campus this last weekend, or maybe it was last weekend or the weekend before preseason nationals. I'm not sure. But I feel like that's going to be a guy that's going to be a steal. If you can get him in a room nonstop year-round, I feel like he could be a D1 top talent. He keeps improving. This is his first summer that he was doing Greco and freestyle, and look at what he was able to do. So I feel like he's one of those guys that's very coachable, and you can mold him into really anybody that you want him to be. So I'm excited for him to continue to climb up this ladder, and I know he's wrestling in the Rumble, the River. He's going to as many tournaments as he possibly can to get his name out there. So I feel like he's going to keep climbing that Fab 50.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with Broderson is his weight jump. He's getting to be a big boy. He won it at 60 last year, and he's going to be at 82 this year. And, that's going to be a cut even to get him down to 82 from what I've seen. I just was at practice with him here a couple weeks ago, and the kid's huge. He just kind of keeps hitting the weights, adding muscle, and it'd be fun to see how high he gets and how well he does this year up that way. But yeah, I do. I agree completely with you. I know, he's got quite a few schools that have been looking at him, D1 wise, and I think he's a really good recruit. And Runyon as well. I know Runyon was in Iowa City on a visit this last weekend as well. So he's definitely got some good D1 interest going already too.
It'll be interesting. You said Runyon?
Yeah, Runyon was in Iowa City this last weekend.
Really?
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see how he adjusts into that wrestling room, because in Indianola he was the guy, right? He was the guy, and you get into that Southeast Poker Room and you're not the guy. You're not the top. You're not the alpha male. So it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts. I think, obviously, the more people you're surrounded by that can push you, the better. I've said on social media, I think on the podcast too, that I think last year, I can't remember, it was Indianola Johnson tournament. I just said he was kind of like a a sleeping giant or a guy you need to look out for. I can't remember what my words were, but he's coming to fruition, and I just interesting to see how he handles the pressure at Southeast Polk. It's going to be completely different than it was at Indianola. Oh, who else? Who else is in your Fab 50 that maybe who's creeped into the Fab 50 that wasn't there before here on the lower end? The 40s, the 30s, into your Fab 50 rankings.
Yeah, there was a few guys creeped in the 40s there with big summers. Caleb Reeves, Sigourney Kyoto. I know this has been one that's been debated in past Fab 50s as well that he hasn't been in. His folk style accolades aren't great. He's a 2-time 7th place finisher. He's got some losses in the state of Iowa that have been, not great, a little questionable, but, he continues to impress on the summer, freestyle, Greco scene. He was an All-American again in Greco. So, I just had a tough time not putting him in. So Caleb Reeves is going to make it in. Cody Fisher. This kid kind of, he was a great AAU wrestler, upper weight though. So last year coming in at, 195, it was a question of how well he'd do as a freshman at a weight like that. All he does is goes and makes the state finals, gets second as a freshman. Still had some questions about that. He goes out, he's a double All-American in Fargo. He got 7th in freestyle, 8th in Greco. So you factor all that stuff in, state finalist, All-American. He makes it in. And then another one that, I know we've talked about and really been keeping an eye on is Tyrell Gordon. He didn't qualify for state as a freshman, sophomore, and then kind of just bust onto the scene last year, plays 4th at state, and then goes out to Fargo and, really in a way out of nowhere makes the stand. He gets 5th in freestyle, junior freestyle at 220, which is, you're wrestling with the big guys there and, had a great tournament. So kind of burst onto the scene. And so he makes it in. So all 3 of those guys are going to be in the 40s there. So nice to see some new names, some fresh blood in the Fab 50 as well there. And then, like I say, Oldham, got Oldham slotted at 35 now from all the way out. We just talked about him. He makes a really big jump into the Fab 50 coming in at 35.
It's been a while. When was the last time you released these? Was it before? Was it right after
Fargo?
Right before Fargo?
No, it was early summer, I believe.
So, did you take into fact Fargo results too, or is this kind of most recent?
No, this includes Fargo as well. So, Fargo, Preseason, Conflict, Super 32. Those are kind of the main ones I looked at. In a case like Hunter DeJong, the Pan Am's, Worlds, that kind of stuff. Obviously, he made some of those teams. So,
do you feel like these rankings are harder than your individual rankings? So, you're the 2A guy. Do you feel like these are harder or easier?
These are 100% harder. These are crazy. When you do rankings for whatever class it is, there's so much head-to-head, and you're ranking weight by weight. So when you're ranking at 106, there's a lot easier ways to compare all these 106-pounders. They've wrestled each other. They've wrestled common opponents. They've, placed at these certain tournaments or state. There's just so many common factors that it makes it easier. When you're doing a Fab 50, you're going every weight, all 3 classes. I don't know how many kids that wrestle in the state of Iowa. So to come down to 50 is pretty incredible. There's some names, I look at some of these guys that I have on this list that aren't on there, and I could do a top 75, top 100, and there'd still be really good kids that would make that list. I have guys who made the state finals who didn't make the Fab 50. So, I know some people won't be happy. There'll be people left off, I'll hear. But, there's a lot of really good wrestlers not in this list, but only 50 can do it. So,
and one of the things that, the Fab 50 is not built on, you're pretty results driven. It's not a projection of where these guys are going. So, Colin Shriver being at number 3 already tells you that he's already accomplished a lot. Just kind of looking at the Fab 50, there's only you you did it, to my knowledge, you usually do it at the beginning of summer, so, a little bit after the season, right at the beginning of Freco season. Maybe you do one more before Fargo, and then you do this one in the preseason. So we don't factor in freshmen, or I guess you don't. So who are some guys, because there's only 4 guys that are sophomores on this list, who are some names that have some, ability to break onto this list in the next set that comes out at the end of the next season?
Yeah, definitely. So there's some, if you want to talk about, like, say, that sophomore class, Ben Monroe, I believe, was, in the last set. Didn't really wrestle a lot this summer, anything like that. And then just got kind of passed up. All those guys we talked about had great Fargos, things like that. You have the 2 guys moving in and Dugan and Ramirez. So Monroe just kind of slid off, but I fully expect him to be well into this list again the next time it comes out. As far as that class as well, guys like, Gabe Christensen, Will Esmoil, Cody Anderson, Eli Lloyd. I mean, there's a lot of good kids in the class. Jack Thompson, and then juniors. There's a lot of good kids that juniors, they're going to be seniors next year. I expect, guys like Drake Doolittle, Riley Wright, Josh Tibbetts, Jared Cadell. That's a name you don't hear a whole lot about in the state of Iowa. Some people know his family name, the Cadell name. Columbus community, he was a tiny kid as a freshman, didn't even really make the lineup. Grew a little bit last year, had a really nice year, took some losses, but came through at the end, got second at state, and then did go up and got third at preseason nationals at 106. So he was kind of one of those that was really close, really on edge of making this list with both those accomplishments, but just missed. So I expect Cadell to get up in there. Some other kids like that. Daniel Kimball got 5th at Fargo at 100. Has struggled a little bit up at 106, but he's another kid that can make a jump with a good year this year. And then freshmen, we got some really, really good kids in this freshman class. You're going to see kids like Drake Ayala, Caleb Rathjen, Brandon O'Brien. Those kind of guys are going to get on this list. They just need to get some high school under their belt. Once they're eligible for this list, I fully expect them to be on. There's a lot of other good kids, Voss and Meyer from West Delaware, Cedar Rapids Kennedy, you got Cale Knox. I mean, I'm just going to forget a bunch of kids, but there's a lot of good freshmen coming in as well. So I'm not worried about being short on talent.
Okay, so this does not include any you're 100% leaving out the 8th graders in this.
I'm leaving out kids that are entering or just starting their freshman season. Correct.
Okay.
So this are kids that wrestled in high school last year. So there's really only 3 classes worth in this Fab 50. It's this year's sophomores, juniors, and seniors.
Okay. I think that's probably pretty important because there's going to be people want to know where the hell Caleb Ratchen's at. So I think that's important for people to know that, there's just not going to be freshmen in it right now, just like the high school rankings that you guys do. For people that are, we're already getting Lars. We're already getting direct messages, emails. When does the rankings come out? When's that first set? When do you guys start, contacting coaches? I mean, the 13th. That's when wrestling starts, my man. When can we expect the first set of high school rankings?
Yeah, so it gets tough, this time of year. The problem is, football anymore takes so long that it kind of overlaps with wrestling at some schools, depending on how their football team's doing, things like that. So really, we haven't made too much contact yet, but I expect within the next week to 2 weeks, Kirk and Eric and I will be reaching out to most high schools, trying to get ideas of where weights will be. We have pretty good ideas of who the kids are. I've been cleaning up from last year's rankings and moving grades, taking out seniors, things like that. So I have a pretty good idea of who's going to be there. Really, at this point, it's just contacting people, trying to figure out weights, where to slot kids, things like that. So we'll start putting those together, and I would expect our first set of rankings. I think the plan is hopefully November 21st. Typically, teams will wrestle that next week of like the 27th, 28th is where a lot of teams will start. The first big tournaments are that first weekend in December with Keith Young and Independence and all those. So sometime right around the 21st of November, we should have that first set of rankings out. So little under a month, about 3 weeks out.
Something tells me Eric Shares is listening to this podcast right now and going, "Are you kidding me?" And he's already complaining about his first set rankings. Like, he's one of those guys. And I love Eric Shares. He'll get the job done. It's just kind of like all of us in our world. Is, we don't want to do things sometimes, but it's just about getting them started. Once we get them started, we've got the motivation to get them done. But it's just getting started. Kind of like working out. I haven't worked out in like a couple months. I've just been eating Milky Ways and eating my kids' Halloween candy. So I can't wait for the rankings, man. That's some of the most exciting times on our website because you finally get a look at what to expect. I mean, people can go off of what happened last year and blah, 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 but the rankings really get a good idea of where we're at. And, last year, your guys' rankings at the end of the state tournament was spot on. Higher percentage than our competitors as far as ranked wrestlers. And, I know a lot of time goes into it. So I encourage coaches that are listening right now, send in your information. Don't complain after the first rankings come out that your kid's not ranked. I mean, we can't pull out thin air that, Drake Ayala is going to bump up to 120 pounds. We know that's not possible. But kids bump up crazy amount of weight sometimes. So,
yeah, and I can tell you this right now. I did it last year too. I will reach out and try to reach out to every single coach in Class 2A and try to figure out weights. But I can only do so much if people don't get back to me. And there is still some guess to it at that point. Next week, one kid might think he's going 170, and by the time the season starts, he drops down to 160 or vice versa. So, we try to slot this as well as we can, try to get him at the right spots. But there'll be some adjusting once the season starts. And then, same thing, middle of the year, if you have a kid going down and you want him ranked at the right weight, let us know. We don't always know ahead of time that a kid's going down a weight unless we hear it from them or from a coach or somebody like that. So, we'll do as well as we can with the information that we got, and hopefully we'll be accurate again this year.
All right, let's move on to where we have a good idea who's going to be making the team, who's going to be preseason ranked at the college scene. Found out today Iowa State is going to be, their wrestle-offs basically are going to be the Lindenwood Open and the Harold Nichols Open. They're not going to hold wrestle-offs like they've done the last couple of years. Iowa is bringing back wrestle-offs, which I am ecstatic about. We can't stream them. They won't be streamed, unfortunately, so you got to be at Iowa Thursday. There's a few pigtails. Then Friday, Saturday, there's some matches as well. Ross, I know you're planning on being there, and you put out some matches that you want to see. You got to be fired up. You're an Iowa homer, right?
Of course. Everyone loves to bring that topic up.
So, what are you expecting? What are you expecting to see on? Are you gonna go? Are you gonna go to the pigtails on Thursday or?
Thursday, I can't make it, unfortunately. Got a work meeting same time as wrestle off, so that kind of put me in a bind there. But I'll be there Friday and Saturday for sure, and I'm pumped up. First time since Corey Clark was a true freshman. This has been a long time coming. I put up my top 5 matches. I think they still hold up pretty well. I kind of want to know. I put out the obvious ones, I feel like, in that article, but I'm kind of curious to see if you guys have any thoughts on, is there any matches or anybody that you're really curious to see compete?
Me?
Either you or Lars, is there somebody that I missed in my 5 matches?
I think a couple guys that I'm excited to see, I just don't know a lot about. I haven't been able to see. I'm going to ramble off just by weight classes. I think Justin Stickley is a guy that I want to see wrestle. Max Murin is somebody that I want to see. Vince Turk is, we've hyped up his name quite a bit. I want to see, who does, how he does against Carter Happel. Obviously, that weight class is yet to be seen. Pat Lugo, you mentioned him. Obviously, that's a big name. Moody, maybe, that's was when he committed to Iowa, was a guy for me that was like, who the heck is Jeremiah Moody? So that is one. Sam Cook, that is one that I feel like, he hasn't wrestled. He hasn't been in a wrestling room for 2 years? He hasn't put on wrestling shoes for 2 years. He's coming off of football, so he's getting, he's going to be at Wrestle Loss wrestling Cade Brownlee. The winner takes on Cash Wilkie, so that's very interesting. And then I want to see how Costello does against Stoll. So those are, I think, a lot of just question marks, I guess. I mean, those aren't guys that I think could maybe make the team, but those are names that we just want to see more of because, let's face it, Iowa missed out on some recruits, big recruits. And these are the guys that are going to have to be the leaders. And we got to figure out if they can be the team, if they can make the team or not, because the recruits aren't coming in right now.
I'm excited to see Sam Stoll. We haven't seen this guy wrestle in a long time, and they have him set to wrestle Costello on Saturday. I think that's exciting. I know a lot of people have been questioning, is he ready? Is he not? How's the rehab coming? The fact that they right now have him scheduled to wrestle Saturday, I think is awesome. I can't wait to see that. And, really, I think 97 is interesting. Obviously, Wilkie's the guy everybody's looking for after the performance he had at Nationals. But Stephen Holloway, I didn't know that he'd be able to make it back to 97 or not. He got pretty big last year when he was wrestling heavyweight. So I'm interested just to see him back down at that weight. And then obviously with Jacob Warner there, I think that's awesome just to see where he's at. He's, a huge recruit. So I think that'll be fun seeing him on the mat. And Gunther and Young, I think a lot of people are kind of writing this off as Caleb Young's weight. I think we're all huge fans of Caleb Young. We brought him into the Night of Conflict when he was in high school. We were all super impressed with him, really high on him. But, I mean, people are just sleeping on the fact of how great of a year Joey Gunther had last year. He kind of got thrown to the fire, had a really, really good year. And, I just kind of want to see where that matchup is. And, is Young really separated in the guy, or, is Gunther going to have a say at that weight yet?
I think one of the things that was most impressive about Joey Gunther was, he spent all season with, is Alex Marinelli's going to get his shirt pulled? When is the bull going to be unleashed? And he had to deal with that chatter, from day one of the season until pretty much Big Tens. He had to wonder, hey, is Alex Marinelli going to wrestle? There's people saying, after Caleb Young's Midlands performance, hey, maybe even Caleb Young can go if they're not going to pull Marinelli. So I think it's just really underappreciated how good Joey Gunther performed when he had all these people talking around him that, he's the third best option on the team at 165. So that's why I put that match up there in the top. I think that I have that one number 3 just because Gunther you said it. He had a great season, but just what was going on in the background just makes it that much more impressive to me. And, I'm a little disappointed we don't get Spencer Lee. But, actually, I should ask, Lars, are you coming? Are you coming now?
I don't think I'll be able to make it on Friday because of junior high practice. I am coaching junior high again this year, so that one's going to be a little tough, and I'm not sure about Saturday yet. I'm kind of hoping to make it in, but can't commit to it at this point. We'll see what happens.
We've got Ross Beechek at Ross Beechek at who needs anybody else there when we got him covering the wrestle off, right? I mean, guy's like a legend. Guy's a legend.
Legend's probably a little bit loose of a term, but I'm definitely excited to be back in Iowa City. Next week is Media Day. That's always a fun time. Tom Brands is always a character, so I'm looking forward to that next week. It's a great day when college wrestling starts back up. We're gonna have Harold Nichols going on this weekend. It's really great to know college wrestling is back.
We got UNI Media Day, tomorrow?
Tomorrow, yep. Well, people that are listening to this will be today. Nick Ryder's going to be there. I've been debating whether to go or not. I spent way too much time in Ames, Iowa today. trying to find Wi-Fi. I ended up at Jethro's barbecue drinking a couple beers, which was not that bad, but that's the only place I can find Wi-Fi. Only place I can find Wi-Fi to upload videos is insane to me. I'm at a college campus, and no videos will upload. Anyways, so I went to UNI's media day last year, and Michelle Van Dorn is literally an unsung hero for that program. She's the SID there. She's super helpful of like trying to get interviews, and so I'd like to be up there, but it's just a long ways to go. And the main reason why I would probably go is for fight night. Kevin Dresser at media day today is like, he's like, I heard it's called fight night. I'm expecting to get punched in the face. So I mean, I'm prepared for anything. I'm bringing Zadok. I'm bringing Derek St. John and Metcalf with me. So I'm here to fight. Who's going to bring their team? So I think fight night at the Nighthawk will be really the reason why I would go up there, because I know Nick Ryder's going to do a hell of a job covering it. So the Nighthawk, the fight night will be streamed. Actually, hopefully we'll have that stream on our website. But be looking for that tomorrow night or tonight, I guess, if you're listening to this podcast. So lots of questions of you and I. They've just been struggling with injuries, right, in years past, guys. I mean, it just seems like things just haven't been able to all fall in place because there's always been somebody that's been hurt, and they just need a year. They just need a year for everything to go right. I mean, is Logan? I can't remember. Is Logan Ryan wrestling? Can he wrestle this year? He didn't get his release from Iowa, right? I can't remember. Did he ever get his full release?
I believe he did, didn't he? I think he is eligible to wrestle. Now it's just a matter of trying to find a spot in the lineup. They're going to be pretty solid in some of those lower weights there. I got a question for you guys. Iowa's got a ton of question marks right now, especially, first semester. No Lee, no Downey, things like that. Iowa State's going to be young, unproven, new staff. Do you guys think UNI Panthers are going to be the best wrestling team in the state of Iowa to start the year?
Ooh. Well, I do know when I was writing the previews for the 3 Division I teams, Nick Ryder sent me a text one night asking me if I needed help. He's being a good contributor to the site. And, I told him, I said, man, I know UNI's your thing, but they are the easiest team to preview because they have the least amount of question marks. And Iowa State was a little bit easier. Iowa is the real kicker of what they're going to do. But it just, UNI, they're solid. I think, I talked to Logan Ryan, and I asked him, is 57 going to be the weight? Because you were up at 65 this past year for Iowa, and he said, no, I'm going to 57. I was at 65 because I knew I couldn't make the lineup there, so, his only chance was to challenge Gunther. So that's where we're going to see Logan Ryan, definitely eligible to go. So they got some impact, talent coming in from the University of Iowa with Logan Ryan, Jack Wagner, a couple Bettendorf Bulldogs looking to make the lineup. I think they're a lot more solid team. I'd really have to think about it if they're the best team, though. I got to think about it. I got to go through it in my head.
I would say Iowa State's got a hell of a team. If they, depending on how, I guess I want to see how this weekend goes. It sounds like UNI's bringing their team to Nichols Open, so I think we'll get a good idea of really how everybody does fare. UNI's going to Grandview Open, which we're streaming, and I've heard that Iowa State's possibly going to send some guys there too. They got a duel on Sunday, but we're gonna get to know UNI's squad pretty quickly because it sounds like they're throwing their varsity in some of these opens real early. So Iowa State versus UNI, we'll get a good idea first this weekend at the Nichols Open. The only people that aren't going to be wrestling at the Nichols Open that Dresser said this weekend would be Gomez, which is obviously a red shirt, and he didn't mention any other big names, I guess. He just said that we were a little dinked up. So we'll get to know really what the heck's going on this weekend, and we will know about Iowa. And when we're going to know Iowa about wrestle-offs, but Iowa doesn't wrestle. Iowa will send probably some true freshmen to Grandview Open, but speaking of Nichols Open, one thing that's changing, guys, and I didn't know this, is they are having a freshman division and an open division.
Boo.
Yeah. Dresser doesn't want to have. He wants the kids to get only 4 matches, so he wants small brackets. So that's kind of a bummer if you do have some of these, UNI coming in, Iowa State, Nebraska. That was kind of a bummer to hear. So hopefully some of these, these bigger universities dump their guys into the open, but they're going to probably protect. They're probably going to protect their mental side of things. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Anything? I mean, we are just. I said we were going to blow this podcast off of. You're just going to be a long commute. If you're commuting now and you're still listening, kudos to you. Give you a little Japan salute. They do, I guess. This has been a heck of a podcast, guys. Thank you, Lars, for jumping on Fab 50 rankings. I know they're tough. If I had my way, it'd be a new Fab 50 every single month, but I'm not the one doing the rankings. So, so we appreciate when we get the Fab 50 changing up. New rankings getting dropped at the end of the month. You heard it first from Lars. November 21st is going to be the target date or something like that. I think I remember, Lars. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the target, and hopefully it'll be that week sometime, I'm sure, but I think the target's going to be Tuesday the 21st.
Perfect. Well, for Ross Beachek, Lars Wrestle, Hager Tony on Twitter, thanks for listening to another episode of Potentially Dangerous with IA Wrestling.
Get low when the whistle go.